A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is a reality. I'm so grateful to We Are the XX, to Catalyst Creative, and to the Downtown Project for bringing us all together so that we could dream a bigger dream for ourselves and for our world. My talk is about the dance of feminine leadership and spirituality. And again, my name is Rochelle Schieck, and I'm the creator of Qoya. Qoya is based on a very simple idea that through movement, we remember. We remember ourselves as spirit. We remember our deepest truths. We remember that we are wise, wild, and free. Wise, wild, and free also draw reference to the movement forms that we practice. So wise being the wisdom of yoga, wild, the creative expression in dance, and free, the ability, expanding the capacity to really enjoy yourself through sensual movement. This is partly because I just want to dance. I was 8 years old, and my friend was taking these dance classes, and I wanted to go so badly that when she would come back from class, I would force her, like physically force her to teach me everything she learned. And after a while, her mom talked to my mom, and then my dream had come true, and I was enrolled in dance classes. And dance really for me was not only my passion, it was my refuge. It was how I made sense of the world. It was how I made sense of a challenging childhood. It was how I found myself again and again. It was through movement that I remembered. And when it came time to choose where I was going to go to college, it was interesting because this was a huge lifestyle shift. I danced 30, 40 hours a week every day after school, all on the weekends, and now all of a sudden it was like I couldn't imagine my life not dancing. So I decided I would dance in college, and everyone's like, that doesn't make any sense. You should really do something more academic, right? And so luckily I had read a book called The Alchemist, and The Alchemist is based on the simple idea that if you follow your heart, the world will conspire on your behalf. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to make decisions based on my heart and see what happens. If it works out, I'll keep doing it, and if it doesn't, then I will reassess. And so I decided to go to college and study dance, and I've made that, it worked out pretty well. And I've been following my heart for about 15 years since, and I came up with a couple things that, for me, exhibit being a feminine leader, being on your spiritual path, and things that I think happen when you're really following your heart. First is that it rarely makes linear sense. And for me, there's this thing that I found in a lot of my spiritual studies too, this difference between linear time and sacred time. So linear time shoots like a bow and arrow in one direction, but sacred time moves like a circle. And that's where these elements of synchronicity and magic come into play. So my little story about I just wanted to dance and go to college, well, it ended up that when I started dancing, I got a scholarship, and I had to pay for school myself. So it ended up being a really good thing that I decided to dance, but I could have never known that. It was just through following my heart. The other thing I noticed is that it requires a leap of faith from probability to possibility. And I've noticed this over and over again in so many of these stories. It's never like, well, I had all this savings, I had all this free time, and there was a 99% chance it was going to work out perfectly, so then I followed my dream. It's just, it doesn't seem to be part of the equation. It's almost like part of the element is that it requires this leap of faith. The more interesting part for me in the work that I do now is that I felt a zing in my body. I knew it was the right thing to do. I knew it in my bones. And one of the women that I really respect, her name is Watterson, and she has a book coming out called Reveal. And I heard her speak a couple years ago, and she talked about differentiating between your ego voice and then also the voice of your heart, your spirit, your soul. And that the ego voice sounds a little bit like a used car salesman. You know, like there's a list of justifications, well, you should do this because of this and this and this, where the heart and soul is like, it's a simple, softer, but it's a profound truth. And for me, it's a physical sensation. That's why I'm so passionate about the work I do around movement, so that women can start to have a safe and sacred space to feel their truth in their body and use that as their north compass, north on their compass. So one of the first things that happened when I started dancing in college was they recommended that I take a yoga class. And when I went to yoga, at the end of class, I thought, oh my gosh, that's the best I've ever felt in my body, which is a big statement after dancing all the time. I went back the next day, oh my gosh, that's the best I've ever felt. So I went every day for about 6 months, and in those 6 months, my whole life changed in a lot of different ways. But the most profound thing was that I felt the physical sensation of my divine spark that animated me, but I felt it as also the divine spark that animated everyone else in all of life. And the thing that was interesting is that it was a physical sensation. It wasn't something I read in a book. And this is where it becomes really interesting about the divine feminine, because there's this part of the reclamation of the body as sacred. So one of my favorite books on my journey to learn more about spirituality that is inclusive to the feminine story is this book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess, and it's by Leonard Shlain. And basically, he has this theory that once upon a time, women, the goddess, was revered. But he draws this correlation between the invention of literacy and the fall of the feminine and the rise of the patriarchy. And that basically is what was happening, is that as we started to write things down, the oral traditions and the physical sensations that used to be honored in how we understood the divine, now it was, no, read this book. This is how it is. And so this valuing of what we know to be true in our body was really lost. And maybe there's also a correlation between, the witch hunts and the Inquisition and all the women that were burned for the truth that they stood for. And it's a big deal. So in the reclamation of the body as sacred, it's a very profound act. And so part of my journey was, again, the realization of oneness, because, again, it was something that I just felt to be true. It wasn't like the golden rule, like, oh, you should treat the other person, the way that you want to be treated. It was, no, I know the other person is me because I feel it. So this comes to the other thing that I think is so important for feminine leaders, and that's the importance of trusting yourself deeply and valuing your intuition and shifting this paradigm from waiting for external validation to your internal validation being enough, which is such a breath of fresh air to be in this room and hear all these women's stories where they have found this on their own and then are starting communities that create support for more and more women to be able to trust their own wisdom. So as I went on my yogic journey, basically the question that came up was, how can I combine my strengths, passions to serve the highest good? And I'm part of the Eat, Pray, Love generation. So I read that book, and at the end of it, I was like, actually, what I did is I started reading it at night. I woke up in the morning, took a little nap, called in sick to work, and then read the book all day. And then at the end of the day, I booked a ticket to India 6 months from that day. And I was like, in the next 6 months, I need to break up with my boyfriend, quit my job, save up some money, and figure out something about where I'm going to go in India. And it ended up being about 10 years of traveling. I came back every once in a while, but I learned so much about the divine feminine. And one of the things when I first landed in India was this idea of a devotional culture. When I went into one of my first temples, I just dropped to the floor in prostration. And it wasn't that I decided to, I just did. And it was such an interesting juxtaposition to the churches that I had grown up in, where it was it's like you woke yourself up snoring sometimes. So this real feeling of devotion, and I just felt this fervent search for God, for goddess. And so that took me to Southeast Asia and studying Buddhism and Vipassana meditation, where it's 10 days, no talking, no eye contact, no food, and having the opportunity to really disassociate from just my thoughts and become more of an observer, a spirit, and identify with that part of me that never does die, that soul force. I went to Australia and New Zealand and started practicing vision quests and walkabouts, where you set an intention and you just go. You could do this in your own city. Just go for a day and you interpret everything that happens through that intention, that question, that lens. I ended up going to South America and studying with the shamans and really realizing that gratitude is a superpower, and learning so much about their wisdom, which is an unbroken chain of healing that's devoted to the divine feminine, and divine feminine being Mother Earth. I went to Brazil just to study an embodied culture. What does it look like when everyone's having a really great time in their body and being so active all the time? And basically, there's a lot of other journeys that I went on that there's not enough time for. But if I were to say, from all the experiences that I've had traveling, this passionate search for God and to reclaim the divine feminine, one of the things I found when I recently went on a journey specifically to reclaim the divine feminine was I was going to see Mother Mary churches in Italy, Black Madonnas in France, Glastonbury in England, this town devoted to the goddess, is that I realized it was so funny. I thought I was going to reclaim her myself, and I got there and realized she was everywhere. Like, it was so, I mean, literally in Rome, every woman I met had a necklace of Mother Mary. An image of her was ingrained into every building. And this is a really interesting thing because the Mother Mary is mentioned in the New Testament 8 times. And so if you've been to Mexico and you see Our Lady of Guadalupe, this passionate love of the feminine, of the mother, of this thing we yearn for, and we find ways. But it's like she's everywhere. She's in all of us. This is, for me, my idea of the divine feminine is rooted in love, and the divine masculine is rooted in action, and that it's like a beautiful interplay of both of them within us. It's the sacred marriage and the sacred harmony within us first, so that we can create it in our world. So of all the things I've learned, basically it comes back to, it's just love. And it's interesting to also note that the ego loves for things to be complicated, because then you can feel really good about yourself when you figure it out. Like, I mean, it's just how it works. And it feels really good about the sense of it being difficult, hierarchy, levels. But the heart, the spirit, the soul thrives in simplicity, thrives in truth. And this is our truth, and I believe this is why we're here, and I am so inspired to be in a room of people, to be a witness to this downtown project, to see this as spreading out into a community, and to see this rootedness in love and love in action. So I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Any questions for Rochelle? We love you.
Thank you. Yes.
How can people find out more about Qoya and how to get involved with Qoya?
Thank you. My website is wisewildfree.com. Oh, sorry. Repeat the question. How can you become more involved in Qoya and the work that I do? The website is wisewildfree.com, and I'm a very passionate blogger. So if you're interested in any of the things I've talked about, there's an archive of several years of things there. And then I lead retreats around the world. So Costa Rica, Greece, India, Chile, Peru, New York, LA, and I'll go anywhere. Vegas. I love to be invited places, so if you invite me, I'll come. Everything's in storage. I just travel and teach. And so, and then I teach classes, workshops, retreats, all those things. Thank you. Well, we just need a little music. Or after, I know there's lots of other people who want to speak, so I think maybe we should all go out and celebrate and dance together. Oh, and tomorrow, yeah. Yep, tomorrow I'm teaching a class at the Ogden, 2504 at 11 a.m. Sorry, men, it's women only. I love men, and I do teach classes for men, but this one's specific for women. 11-11. Thank you so much.